What is going on, everybody? Thank you so much for joining us here. It's a special Alarm Fantasy Football that we're broadcasting here right ahead of the Fantasy Football Expo. A lot of people, including Coop, are traveling, so I get to have a little fun here. We get to push his show aside. I get to do it here, and I get to bring in one of my absolute favorites. You guys know him from appearances at the Fantasy Alarm Show on Sirius XM. You know him from the FFPC live stream that he does every Thursday. It is none other than Eric Balkman of the FFPC. What is up, Eric? How are you? Thanks so much for joining me tonight.
Oh, it's going to be a lot of fun. Anytime I get a chance to talk fantasy football with you, we always have a good time. And we might actually even help some people when they watch this too.
Right? We might. Listen, you know what it was? I was thinking about like the reasons behind doing this. And for those of you out there who didn't hear it all last year, Balky and I got to do a full broadcast of the FFPC main event together. And it was you, it was me. We weren't worrying about commercials like we do on the Sirius XM show. We could just kind of just shoot it back and forth here. So for me, this is going to be nice and super casual, but more importantly, want to get everybody all amped up. It's less than 30 days till the NFL season starts, man. It's less than 30 days. And the contest over at the FFPC, which, by the way, myffpc.com, right up here in this corner, boop, 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 you got a little QR code right there. You're going to want to zap that. You're going to want to zap it a ton of times during this, because everything that we're going to talk about here, we're also going to spin in relation to the rules at the FFPC, which means a little tight end premium talk, which you know how much I love that, man. So first and foremost, Balky, talk to me, man. How's everything going over there at the FFPC? How's everything going with you, with everything that you got going on right now?
It's a lot of fun. It's going great. We got a great community of a lot of great drafters that are drafting in any number of the numerous formats that we have. The FFPC main event, the Fantasy Pros Championship. We have 2 separate best ball tournaments that are filling up as well. We introduced Empire Dynasty Leagues this year, which is basically a progressive payout form of Dynasty Fantasy Football. And then obviously our normal Dynasty Leagues, we got closed 12-team leagues starting at $5, going all the way up to $10,000 as well. So it seems like we've had something for everybody. Nobody has ever come to me and say, Balky, I love all the stuff that you do on the Alarm or any of your shows, but FFPC doesn't really have a league for me. We do. Nobody's ever said that to me, because we have a league for everybody over at the FFPC. So yeah, I mean, we got preseason underway now, and we're starting to get, we're drinking from the fire hose of information, right? Everything is just being fired at us. And obviously when you have stuff like that, you have to understand that not all of it is super relevant, and some of it is super relevant. And I think that what we're trying to do here tonight is try to help you parse through what you need to know and how you most importantly utilize it to make sure you're using the right tactics in your drafts leading up to the start of the NFL season.
Blocking out the noise can be such a pain in the ass sometimes. It really can. Like, it's just, you get to a point where you're like, every little thing. This guy's uncoverable. The coaches really love this dude. Like, I'm sitting here in the middle of Jonathan Gannon, praising Greg Dortch a ton, where everybody's like, oh, you told me Michael Wilson, blah, blah, blah. Like, so I mean, it's, we go through all of that here, and it's our job to help you guys sift through a lot of the noise. So we're just going to kind of we're going to roll through a number of different topics here, all fantasy football related. We're going to spin it all towards the FFPC, and we hope you guys enjoy the show. And I'll tell you what, you've got Balky's Twitter handle right there at Eric Balkman. You've got mine right here at Roto Buzz Guy. So we're recording this, so there's no live chat going on. But if you guys have any questions, anything whatsoever about anything that we talk about tonight, including how to get into some of these leagues and where we want to, and how best to spend whatever your budget is over at the FFPC, hit us up on social media. 100%. That's why we're here. That's why we do this. We do this to help get you signed up into a league, into a tournament, whatever you're most comfortable with. So all that being said, what we're going to do is we're going to start things off here by talking about offenses in general, the teams where we want to be most invested in, maybe the teams that we want to fade completely here. And, you guys know over at Fantasy Alarm, I do all the offensive schemes and I write those articles all up. So I'm going to turn to you, Eric, and I'm going to say, let's shout out an offense that you want to target here, and we can just kind of sit and go back and forth.
I think one of the things that I've noticed in drafts this year is, well, number one, everybody gets sharper every year, right? Because there's a wealth of information, and I think people just become better fantasy players by drafting and managing teams more. One of the things I've noticed in FFPC drafts this year, there has been a premium put on offenses that score a lot of points, that chew up a lot of yardage. Who'd have thunk it? Draft good players on great offenses, right? Easy game. But I'm seeing more of a premium put on it this year. So it can be a little tricky to try to navigate this. You want to be in business with certain offenses, but you also don't want to go overboard in drafting some of the players off these offenses. Bear in mind that if you're playing in a best ball tournament or the Fantasy Pros Championship or the main event, if you start overdrafting some of these players, you have to understand that some of these players were not overdrafted, and now you're going up against them when it gets to be the championship round. So I always say exercise caution, but an offense that I would want to be in business with this year is the Seattle Seahawks. That's where we'll start.
Really?
I look at the trio of receivers they have there. Pedigree guys in DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith and Jigba. A guy in Tyler Lockett, who I know it's a long time ago, but they traded up for, and they have continuously signed him to new deals. So he's a big part of their offense. The offensive line that they have put together, young guys, but talented guys that have cleared the way for Kenneth Walker. And, oh, by the way, if Walker gets hurt, Zach Charbonnet can step in and not only handle the rock between the tackles, but he's a pretty talented pass catcher. Then you look at Geno Smith, who is the quarterback of this entire offense. Geno Smith right now is not being drafted until the 17-18 turn. So you can get him super cheap. All these things can say, like, I know there's downsides with all these guys, and perhaps when you have an offense like this, it's actually better to be drafting them in best ball than managed leagues. But I do think there's fantasy value, especially in Jackson Smith and Jigba right now, especially on Zach Charbonnet right now, and a ton on Geno Smith. But I can't really say I'm fading any of these other guys. So as far as an offense I want to target this year, I'm not fading anybody on that Seattle offense. I think they all represent pretty good value.
Isn't that funny what we're hearing right now about Geno Smith? Like, I remember when he was, backing up in the Jets organization, got punched in the mouth by a teammate, for crying out loud. And now all I'm hearing is that he's one of the most underrated assets in football right now. I love Ryan Grubb's offense. Now, we saw a lot of what he was doing at the University of Washington. It's kind of funny, you put Metcalf and Jackson Smith in the Jigba, and then you went over to Tyler Lockett, which I think is what everybody is telling us right now anyway, that this is Jackson Smith and Jigba's time to shine, and maybe Tyler Lockett's more of just a field stretcher kind of thing. But what I've broken down and what I've looked at in this offense is just the fact of how central a piece DK Metcalf is going to be. Like, I have him ranked in the top 10 of wide receivers, and people are thinking I'm absolutely nuts. But what he's going to be doing is the Rome Odunze role from last season at Washington, where Odunze was getting all the targets and he was getting all the love, and there was all sorts of great plays for him. There was a lot of misdirection around the field, drawing coverage away just to isolate him into some one-on-one coverage. And I think that's going to happen a ton with Metcalf. So I love the Metcalf call. It's so funny. I mean, I'm so over-invested in my Will Levis love that I always pass up on Geno Smith. When I go for that third quarterback in the Superflex, I always end up skipping Geno Smith. You think I need to start getting active in on some Geno, huh?
I will say that, Ryan Grubb spent part of his time meeting with the press, and he was just praising Geno Smith. And I don't think it was just coach speak saying how valuable it is. And now maybe when you say that he's an elite quarterback, okay, that's a little bit over the top. But Grubb strikes me as a guy here's what always irritates me about coaches, Howard. I don't like coaches who come in and say, this is my scheme. This is what I run. This is what we're going to do. I need the players to fit that scheme. Well, if you're a really good coach, you should be able to craft your scheme around what you have on that team. And Ryan Grubb has gone out of his way to say that's exactly what he's doing in Seattle. What he did in Washington, hey, that was great. But I think part of the reason he did that and was so successful in Washington, not only having Odunze and McMillan and Polk and Penix and all these guys, but he understood how to get the most out of them. And I think that's what he's doing in Seattle. How do I get the most out of Geno Smith? How do I put all these receivers in positions where they can make plays and succeed? I think that's the mark of a good coach. He's coming in and coaching the guys that are there and putting an offense together that's going to maximize their potential, not coming in to put in his scheme. I think that he's a good coach. I think this is a good move for Seattle. And yeah, I think Geno Smith, you don't have to take Will Levis every time, but you can pepper in some Geno Smith in there later too, Howard.
All right. I'll you know what? I'll tell you what. I'm doing so many drafts right now. It's absolutely insane. And I haven't even started redeeming everything that I've got over at the FFPC. So my dance card, insanely full for you. I will find my way into some Geno Smith for sure. Now, I love the fact that you went with Seattle, right? Offenses to invest in Kansas City and Detroit. Give me another under the radar offense then that you're kind of digging on.
I don't know if it's under the radar anymore. I think it was, but now it's just it's the Atlanta Falcons are just such a hot commodity right now. We saw once Kirk Cousins signed with the Atlanta Falcons. We saw a spike for Drake London in the Fantasy Pros Championship, and now we're seeing another spike. This is a guy that's going in sometimes the mid second round. I have people telling me that he's going to be at the 1-2 turn. Before the NFL season starts, that last week of fantasy football drafting that we're going to have. That may or may not happen. I don't know. I do think that he's a player you want to be in business with. I do think Kyle Pitts is a player, again, polarizing guy every single year, but that's another player that is going to have a good season this year. And because we have all these talented tight ends, Laporta, Kincaid, Kelsey, Andrews, all these guys that are going in the second round of FFPC drafts, it pushes Pitts down a little bit. And I don't think he's going to get up to that mid-second. I think he's going to stay in the early to mid-third, which is a nice value for Pitts this year. Those are just the top two pass catchers. Think about the running backs on this team. Robinson and Algier, a great 1-2 punch. And Robinson's going to be able to catch a lot of passes out of the backfield. And nobody's talking about Darnell Mooney. I think Mooney is a great guy to have opposite Drake London too. And you say, well, maybe Cousins isn't all the way recovered from the Achilles. And I don't know, maybe he is, maybe he isn't. It sounds like he is. It sounds like he's doing everything they need him to do. Even if he were to go down, I know he's not a young man anymore, even by quarterback standards. Michael Penix, I think, is a really, really talented quarterback. And he's one of those rare rookie quarterbacks that if he has to come in a pinch, he's going to keep London, Robinson, Pitts. He's going to keep Mooney. He's going to keep all these guys relevant. So I think Atlanta, again, you got to pay a premium for London and Pitts, but these other guys come at pretty good values. Cousins and Mooney come in at pretty good values. So I think the foundation is there. I think that the division they play in is going to allow for a lot of shootouts too. 2 games against Carolina, 2 games against New Orleans. I think that it's going to be a fun team to not only watch, but a fun team that you want to be in business with these players this year. So Atlanta's another good offense to target.
And what I love about them also is the targets are contained. Like you look at Green Bay's offense and you got Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson and there's Luke Musgrave and look, everybody, right? Big fantasy all in on Dontavian Wicks. He's going to be the best, right? So, but it's kind of in that realm. But when you look at Atlanta, it's London, it's Bijan, it's Pitts. Maybe it's Mooney. They just lost Rondale Moore for the entire season with a knee injury. In camp, they don't really have much in there to replace. So it's, for me, I find it kind of interesting that maybe we see a couple of more 2 tight end sets or just move Pitts into the slot and let another tight end just come in and, work like, inline in that front. But yeah, I love that about Atlanta that you know where the ball's going, who to invest in, and you got to pay the premium for some of these guys, but I don't hate it. I literally just took about 10 minutes ago, took Darnell Mooney in like round 13 or 14 of a draft that I'm doing. So, I'm in on that. Let me ask you this one here just about Kyle Pitts, because, we talk about being tight end premium at the FFPC, and you said like mid third is kind of where he's going. I look at that top 5 tight ends, right? We've got Laporta, Kincaid, McBride, Andrews, and Kelsey. I can't believe I even just said Kelsey 5th out of that list, which is crazy. But to me, and it's not even because it's tight end premium at the FFPC, I genuinely do believe that this top tier can expand to 6. Like, people sit there and talk about Kyle Pitts and they're like, oh, well, he hasn't done anything. I'm like, he had a 1,000-yard season his rookie year, and he only had 3 touchdowns, but that wasn't his fault. It wasn't like he wasn't getting separation. The dude was doing what he was supposed to be doing, and the touchdowns didn't come his rookie year. Then he gets, sidetracked with Arthur Smith for a couple of seasons, and that's like a kick in the groin, right? And so whatever, forgiveness of Kyle Pitts, I feel like he can move into that top 5. Do you?
100%. And honestly, if Atlanta's offense goes nuclear this year, and I'm saying that there's the odds are not likely that this will happen, but if Kyle Pitts finishes as tight end 1 this year, that might be surprising, but it might not be shocking. This is a guy who had all the talent in the world coming into the NFL. How many FFPC players in their dynasty rookie drafts were salivating over Kyle Pitts as the 101? How many times did we see Kyle Pitts as a rookie being drafted in the late first, early second round because they thought that this guy was going to be the cheat code at tight end? Those skills are still there. He's still a very good football player. It's just you have a real quarterback now in Atlanta, and you have what we hope is a real offensive coordinator that is going to exploit the players the way that they are meant to be exploited in this offense. He's going to use Kyle Pitts, and Kirk Cousins is going to throw to Kyle Pitts the way that he is meant to be used in this offense. Like, all these things are coming together. I know it sounds like a lot, but all these things can come together and transform Kyle Pitts into a superhero this year at the tight end position. I know there's people that are buying into it for sure. Now, I would still say that the most likely scenario is he has a good season, not great season, and he doesn't get into the top 3 or even into the top 5, but he's going to be close. I mean, worst case scenario, if Kyle Pitts plays all 17 games this season, he's got to be tight end 6, right? I mean, I can't see him going lower than that.
You never struck me as a glass is half empty kind of guy here. I mean, that really surprises me. But, listen, I know he can be an elite level tight end. I know he will be an elite level tight end, right? Zach Robinson, former passing game coordinator for the Rams, worked with McVay. Where did Kirk Cousins play last couple of years? Oh, Minnesota. Who was his coach? Kevin O'Connell, who came from Sean McVay and that whole. So Cousins knows the offensive scheme. We saw what did it do for TJ Hawkinson, right?
Yeah.
That was crazy. So I'm definitely in on that for sure. All right, so Seattle and Atlanta were in. Who are we out on? Like, where's?
I'll tell you one we've talked about already, and I think I've mentioned the one guy I really want to be in business with on that team, and that's Dalton Kincaid, kind of out on Buffalo this year. Josh Allen in the Fantasy Pros Championship is going as the quarterback 1. He is being drafted over Mahomes, Hurts, Jackson, all those guys. I think if you look at what he did last year, a little bit unsustainable as far as rushing touchdowns go, especially with the addition of Ray Davis. And if that, changes things for Allen, okay, so be it. But I do think that Buffalo operated at a hyper efficient level last year. James Cook's the poster boy for that. I mean, nobody was more efficient than he was, to the point where I think there's a huge regression to the mean coming for him. I think there's a regression to the mean coming for Josh Allen. I think that both those players are still being drafted closer to their ceilings rather than, halfway between their ceiling and floor. And I do think there's a lot of question marks at the wide receiver position. You lose Stephon Diggs, who I know he's not in the pinnacle of his athletic career anymore, but he's still right up there. He's damn close to it. And you lose him, and you replace him with Keon Coleman. You replace him with Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who may not make the team. You replace him with Curtis Samuel. I know there's a lot of Khalil Shakir truthers out there too, and I just, I've seen Shakir there. I don't know if he's going to give us as fantasy players any more than he's already given us. I think he is what he is. Kincaid's a stud. He's going to be awesome. Dawson Knox is kind of like an average tight end to me. So I think the Bills, although having a really good offensive season last year, are being drafted as if the same efficiency is going to happen this year. And I don't think that is sustainable. I don't think we normally see stuff like that from year to year. So as long as these Bills are being drafted as a premium at premium spots in their ADP, and I'm specifically referring to the receivers and Allen and Cook, I'm willing to pay up for Kincaid because I think he's going to be awesome this year. Other than that, I'm kind of out on the Bills offense, Howard.
Okay. I mean, listen, I can understand that in the sense that, for drafting purposes, you don't know which wide receiver you want. Like, Joe Brady's system, he's got a lot of those, underneath crossing routes and slants, and he's trying to get the ball into the receiver's hand in stride to pick up those yards after the catch. It's like having a bunch of mice running around, like the underneath routes where you've got Samuel and you've got Shakir, and then is Coleman going to stretch the field, and can he stretch the field? We know that he's good at contesting catches, or at least he was in college, but if he struggles for separation in the NFL, that's going to be an issue. So yeah, I don't know where to go in the wide receiver room. I like the way Joe Brady gets the running back into the passing game, but to your point there, Ray Davis profiles more as like a pass catching running back than even James Cook. And James Cook is actually a really good pass catching running back. So I get it, man. Like, focus on Kincaid. I personally have in my rankings, I've got Mahomes number one because I just love the consistency. Yeah. Like, you just can't go wrong with it. And then I've got Allen and Hurts afterwards because they've both lost something, whether it's weapons for Allen, or it's Jason Kelsey for Jalen Hurts. And it's a whole new scheme also that Kellen Moore's putting in there. I like the consistency of Mahomes. So I get that from you here. I like that. Kincaid is my guy. I will definitely rock on with him, but I could totally understand just fading it because there's no clear-cut pecking order as it seems yet. Any other offenses that are really just kind of, they're driving you a little nuts on that front?
This isn't any earth-shaking one, but you think about what the Vikings gave us last year. It was awesome with Addison, with Jefferson, with Hawkinson, with Madison, all the sons basically that were on the Vikings last year. But Cousins was a big part of that, and now you shift towards Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy. McCarthy could be really good. I don't know if he necessarily. The thing is, McCarthy's one of these guys. He wasn't asked to do a lot at Michigan because they were so good on the ground. He didn't have to make a whole lot of plays. It doesn't necessarily mean he couldn't make plays. Now, Minnesota thought enough of him to trade up, to draft him as their franchise quarterback of the future. And I think Darnold's talented enough to keep Justin Jefferson relevant, where he'll pay right around mid-first round, which is where he's going right now. After that, I don't know. Jordan Addison's had a couple of run-ins off the field that are a little concerning to me. TJ Hawkinson's coming off that torn ACL. And I've loved Aaron Jones for years. And this is not just because he's no longer on my beloved Packers. He had 3 significant injuries last year. And nobody talks about the third one because it happened in the last game of the season.
Right.
This is his age 30 season. He's running behind an offensive line that is okay, but he ran behind a really good one last year. Kind of down on the Vikings. I'm okay with Jefferson as a mid-first round pick. After that, I think everybody else is going too high. Jones, Hawkinson, Addison, I'm kind of out on all those guys at their current ADPs. I think that if McCarthy turns it on when he is the starting quarterback this year, week 6, week 7, I can't remember when the Vikings bye is. It's fairly early. Then maybe we'll have another conversation. But to me, it's just too risky for those ADPs right now.
It's definitely risky for their ADPs. And then you know what? I mean, even funnier there is like there's so little depth behind it. What are we looking at? Like Jalen Naylor as a possibility? Like, first and foremost, like, I don't know what's Jordan Addison's ADP looking like right now in the FFPC? Because with the talk that there's likely a 3-game suspension coming from the DUI, which, okay, fine. But yeah, with McCarthy or Darnold, with Jefferson being such a focal point there, is Addison dropping in drafts right now for you?
He has a little bit. He's going at that 9-10 turn. He's fallen behind. Jamison Williams has moved in front of him. Roma Dunze has moved in front of him. Keon Coleman and Xavier Worthy both in front of him as well. I would imagine, well, it's tough to say because Hopkins is pretty close to him in ADP as well. Addison might move in front of him. I don't know how that's going to happen. But yeah, Addison now to be falling to an early 10th round pick. Still a little bit too high for my taste, given the other receivers I can get around there.
Yeah, that is definitely true. It's kind of a how the mighty have fallen sort of a situation right there. But yeah, I'm with you as well. I was in the middle of a draft, and my wife is in the draft, and she kind of asked for a running back's suggestion. I was like, take Aaron Jones. Go ahead.
And I could be wrong about Jones, and maybe he stays healthy, but that is not the way running backs have historically trended, especially one that's dealt with all the issues that Aaron Jones has had.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I was citing the depth or the lack thereof at the wide receiver position because you're always kind of, you're always got to kind of eyeball, some back end, the late round picks. Is really what it comes down. Like, what are you doing with your late round picks in drafts? Because, I seek guys who could have the opportunity, who have the upside. And I look for that. And I don't see any of that in Minnesota, because what I like to do with my late round guys is, I like to, take guys who I think could do well, could break out a little bit more. But like, they're guys that I'm traditionally trying to be more patient with. Because one of my biggest pet peeves is that people sit there and they'll go for waivers week 1, week 2, week 3, and what they'll do is they'll look for the flavor of the week, and they'll just be like, they're the bottom end of their roster is just a revolving door. The roster churn strategy, I believe, is something you might call it. Like, I've always been against that, but I've got people who are sitting there, telling me that you have to be like ridiculously quick with it, especially if you're in one of these like big tournaments like you guys have in like the main event. Are you a roster churn guy, or are you I'm gonna be patient with these guys and let them do their thing?
I think for redraft, I think roster churn has paid off more for me over the years than, and I think for a lot of high stakes players, it's paid off over the years than being patient. I think it's fine to be patient with the guys you take in the first 10, 12 rounds, maybe even the first 15. But those last 5 picks, I mean, outside of kickers and defenses, you want the guys that are either going to hit right away or they're not going to hit, right? If you take Puka Nacua as an example, towards the end of and I realize this is an extreme example, but take towards the end of drafting season last year, the Nacua stuff really started to come alive week and a half, 2 weeks before, where he was either one of the first added or the top added player off one of the first waiver wires we have. We have 2 preseason waiver wires for the Fantasy Pros Championship. He was either being paid up for $400, $500, $600 there, or he was being drafted 16th, 17th, 18th round. Now, those players in those rounds very rarely hit. They almost never hit, and maybe they've never hit like Puka Nacua did last year. That could have been an all-timer. But I do think you need to be cognizant of, especially if you're playing the main event, especially if you're playing either one of our best ball tournaments or anything like that, you need to understand, well, not best ball because there's no waivers in that, but the Fantasy Pros Championship, you need to be cognizant of trying to get the guy that's going to give you separation in the championship rounds. You need to be drafting players that could be a difference maker down the stretch. So do you want to be patient with a guy like Theo Johnson, for example, who could be the Giants starting tight end, who could be a player that might get off to a slow start, but good paid dividends, the second half of the season? Okay, if you want to be patient on him, that's fine. I typically don't like to do that with my 17th, 18th, 19th round, 20th round picks. Give me the Trey Sermons of the world, or, Eric Gray or Tyrone Tracy, players like that, where they're either going to do something right away and then you keep them around, or if they're buried, if they're barely getting second team snaps, then you get rid of them. You churn out that bottom of your roster for somebody who could. Now, you're rarely going to hit on these players, but when you do, it's huge. And if you miss out on a player, it doesn't really hurt you that much. I think there are certain players in the last few rounds of a draft that you might want to be patient with and keep them on your roster and see how that goes. I don't like to draft those players. I like to let other people keep them and clog their roster. I want the guys that are either going to do something or they're not anything, so I can move on to, what could be the flavor of the week, Howard. That's another good point that you bring up. Just because you pick up a guy, Kendrick Bourne, for God's sake, was that last year or 2 years ago, where he had that big week one, and I thought I hit the lottery with Bourne, and then he tore his ACL or something. But it's something to be reminded of, like that even if it's a player that seems like they're locked in, that the opportunity is there, the snaps are there. Not every player hits, and not everybody could be a Puka Nacua. Not everybody could be an Anquan Bolin was another one. I think you need to understand that this is the game that you're playing. You're getting these players very cheaply off the waiver wire, and you get what you pay for a lot of times. But sometimes you get something a lot more. Sometimes you hit that storage locker on Storage Wars where you get that antique, bike, in the background that nobody can see, and boom, it pays off huge. So I like to churn out the bottom of my roster. That's how I like to draft my teams. Not everybody subscribes to that theory, and I get it. Different strokes for different folks, but I'm just telling you what's worked out for me in the past.
All right. Well, now I'm curious. I'm looking at FFPC ADP right now. And I'm trying to find like really further down the list of where we're looking at. And there are a couple of rookies in that range. You've got Adonai Mitchell. Mm-hmm. We know Josh Downs is out for 4 to 6 weeks right now. You've got Xavier Legette, who might be behind Deontay Johnson and Adam Thielen, but could be an intriguing option if he gets over this hamstring issue. Jermaine Burton, we don't know, I'm still taking Alex Yeshivas way too much in those last rounds, because I feel like he does. How do you handle the rookies in that late stage there? Are you willing to be patient with them, or are they just guys that you'll just ready to churn out?
Yeah, I mean, throw in Javon Baker and Jalen Polk in there too, as long as we're talking rookie receivers. I think that when you draft a player like that, you have to understand that one of the more difficult positions to adjust to in the NFL, unless you're the uber talented, Calvin Johnson, Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, whatever, is wide receiver. So I think there is a certain amount of patience that you have to adhere to when it comes to be those players. Now, let's talk about him individually. A.D. Mitchell, I think, the way I look at him this year is he is going to be a deep threat. He's going to be a field flipper. He's going to be that type of player. Good for best ball, for managed leagues. Going to be tough to know when he is going to pop off. The Downs injury affects him, but I think I'm much more willing to draft a guy like Jelani Woods rather than A.D. Mitchell in the wake of Josh Downs' injury, right? Xavier Legette is a perfect example here. So if he comes in and gets over the hamstring week one, he has something like 4 for 45. Yeah, he's bought himself another week. The next week, 5 for 60. Okay, I might have something in Legette. Week 3, 1 for 10. Week 4, 0 for 0. Okay, I think we can cut bait on Legette, right? So it's a nuanced thing, right? There's no like right answer. There's no hard and fast rules for all these guys, but you really got to look deeper into how are they being used? When are they on the field? What are the other guys doing? So I think that those players could qualify for being a little bit patient with, but at the same time, you don't want to be too patient, and you don't want it to be like November and these 3 for 30 games for Legette and A.D. Mitchell are still happening, right? Or Javon Baker and Polk or whoever. So, and it depends upon how your roster is, how you built it too.
Right.
I mean, if you have a lot of receivers on your team, then these guys become a lot more expendable. If you went with the running, FFPC allows for the dual flex. So if you're playing 4 running backs a week, and you're not necessarily counting on your receivers a whole lot, well, then maybe you can keep them around just to see what happens. So that's the beauty of it. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. We're just kind of trying to find our way until we find the right and wrong answers after the season is over.
Who is your favorite guy right now? Like last round player to take. You find that you've done enough drafts right now that this is like your shot in the dark.
Favorite late round guy.
Because I'm taking all sorts of Tyler Boyd. Like for me, and because I know he's not a high ceiling guy, but like, you know, I'll go after like the Xavier Worthies or the Jalen Polks, and I'll be like, those are my upside guys. But I'm always gonna want to I always want to have like the security of just like a good old fashioned high floor guy that if I run into bye week issues or late injury issues, I can be like, jamming in Tyler Boyd because I know at least that I'm going to get 8 to 10 points from him no matter what.
Right. I'll give you two. And they're not necessarily 20th round guys, but definitely 18th, 19th round guys. Deontay Foreman is one. Foreman is a player that everywhere he has gone, he has somehow weaseled his way through. You know, you always say like, if you give somebody an inch, they'll take a mile. That's Foreman. No matter how tiny that crack is and that open door, if it's open, he's going to find a way through it. And I know he dealt with the injury. I know he's practicing again, but Foreman is a player that has a golden opportunity in front of him. I could not be more off Nick Chubb this year. Definitely done with him. Which I know it sucks, right? Because he's been so great for fantasy players over the years. It's just his age, the wear and tear, how severe that
you didn't see those weightlifting videos? You see him squatting? Come on, look at him squat.
He might have a future in bodybuilding, but his future in professional football, I think it's coming to a close. And what's great about Foreman is, and I know a lot of people, like Jerome Ford is basically being drafted at that 9-10 turn right with Nick Chubb. So obviously everybody believes in, not everybody, most people believe in Ford. What's great about Foreman is if week one comes and Foreman is utilized just as much as Ford, or even like if it's like a 70-30 split, I'm still keeping Foreman on my roster because he's an injury away. I know he can carry the load. I know he's a 3-down guy, and I kind of like what Cleveland's doing with their offense this year. So he's been a favorite of mine to draft late. And then another one, and this is more of a commentary on the offense than the player itself, but Luke McCaffrey is a player that I'm pretty excited about for Dynasty, and I think for redraft there's some value there. I love Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels is a quarterback I've been targeting every draft. I think that Washington offense with Cliff Kingsbury is going to go places this year. Could be wrong. I could totally whiff on this, but I think there's a lot of talent there with the backfield in Eckler and Robinson. Eckler, I'm not sold on him being done. So I think there's still some value there. I love Ben Sinnott. I love McCaffrey. I think Dotson has a nice bounce back this year. And he wasn't even all that bad last year. I think McLaurin and Dotson should be thanking their lucky stars that Washington decided to draft Daniels. Because not only is he an upgrade at the quarterback position, he is the type of quarterback that you want to maximize what those guys do on the field best to maximize their potential. So Luke McCaffrey is a guy who comes in, former quarterback, super athletic, put up great numbers his final year of college. And I think he can step in, and there's a non-zero chance that he could be the slot receiver there. And he could come in and catch, 6-7 balls a game in that offense. Now, he might not be a game breaker. He might not have that lid lifting capability that Dotson and McLaurin have. But if those guys were to go down, all of a sudden his role expands. So, and the fact that you can get him in the 18th round makes perfect sense to me. Now, he's a guy, Howard, if I do draft him, I would be a little bit more patient with him if my roster allowed it to be. Mm-hmm. He's one of those guys where I would break my rule on that. But McCaffrey is another guy that I really, really love late.
I love that. Guys, get in. First and foremost, thank you again for tuning in here to a special Alarm Fantasy Football with Eric Balkman from the FFPC. Got a QR code right up here in the top corner. You got to get in. Whether it's the Fantasy Pros Championship, whether it's the main event, whether it's the best ball tournaments, whether it's just a 12-team contained league, FFPC is where you need to be. We've got it over here with that QR code. I feel like it's part of the deal. I think it's promo code ALARM that gets you $25 off for an entry of $35 or more, your first entry of $35 or more. I think that's kind of something that we've got going on here. I believe just hit that QR code and you guys will be taken care of. Now, Balky, one of the things that like we talk about, obviously, tight end premium being, and, when you deal with like me and Coop and the two of us who have been, tight end fanatics about it, for years and years and years, obviously we flock to something like this. But one of the things, like, obviously you can't compete in an FFPC league. You're not allowed. You work for the company. But I dragged you in. I was like, give me my hooks into them. And I dragged you in. We did a tight end premium mock draft over for the Fantasy Alarm draft guide. You guys can get that one over at fantasyalarm.com/draft. But I brought you into it for the sole fact that for all of this time that we've been, going back and forth about it, I've never watched you draft in a tight end premium format. You were on the wheel. And you did exactly what I did. You got that elite tight end early, and then you like just didn't overrate it. Talk to me about strategies, like how to handle tight end premium in drafts. Obviously, it's a case-by-case basis, but you've seen the ADP. You said it yourself. Kyle Pitts is a mid-third round guy in a tight end premium league. You look at like a regular league, and he's probably like, I don't know, 6th round, 7th round. So, talk to me about like your personal feelings of drafting in tight end premium. Do we overrate the scoring of them?
There has been since 2008. This has been one of the most contentious things that high stakes players have argued about. Whether we put too much stock in the 1.5 point per catch for tight ends, whether it's overrated, whether it's underrated, whether we don't put enough stock into it. I think it depends on a few things. Team construction, obviously. Mm-hmm. Number 2, it kind of depends how dangerous you like to live. I mean, are you, especially this year? So in a tight end premium draft like the FFPC, you can kind of gauge how your draft is going. Okay, is this league, are these 11 guys and women putting an emphasis on tight ends in this draft, or are they letting them slip? Do I need to draft it if I want an elite one? Do I got to make sure I'm on it to get it early, or can I wait a little bit? It's a little bit different this year for FFPC drafts. You have 5 tight ends going on average in the second round. 5, 0 in the first round on average, but 5 in the second. It is the year of the tight end, no question. So it's like, let's say you're drafting where I was in this draft at the back end. How do I handle tight end? I think if I remember correctly, I took Kelsey early because I was nervous that when the board would come back to me in the 3rd, those elite guys would be gone.
I'm not supposed to do this because you're supposed to get the draft guide, but I'm going to do this anyway here. Yeah. And let me see if I can make it a little bit bigger so that way everybody can actually, well, that's too big. That's the first time I've heard that.
So if you look at it, I took Kelsey at the 201, and then boom, Andrews, McBride, Kincaid, and Pitts in this draft was a 2nd round pick. They all went after me. Now, a lot of people would say, well, I'd be fine with going, somebody else instead of Kelsey there, a wide receiver or running back. And that's fine, because some people will say there's too much of a emphasis put on tight end. I'll grab 2 in the middle, or I'll grab 3 in the middle and just cobble my way through that. Typically, I like to have an elite guy, top 4, top 5 guy, and then before the 12th guy goes off, the 13th guy goes off the board, I like to snag a second one too. In the FFPC, you have up to 2 flexes. So you could start up to 3 tight ends if you want. And if I can play 2 tight ends every single week that are getting a lot of targets on their team, you look at some of these other guys that have high ceilings, Kittle, Ferguson, Bowers in the middle rounds, and Njoku. Now, it didn't happen in this draft. I didn't get a second tight end because I felt the value that I was getting with Henry and Waddle and Neighbors and Cooper, all my favorites this year. Maybe not necessarily Henry, but Waddle, Neighbors, and Cooper for sure. I just couldn't pass it up. And that's another thing that I was able to pass up that second tight end because I had one already. I think back to 2009, our FFPC main event, Don Metter won the entire competition with Dante Rosario as his starting tight end. That is an outlier. I don't think it's happened since. There's a lot of different ways to win in the FFPC. There's a lot of different ways to handle tight ends. What I've seen and the conversations I've had with high stakes players, they usually like to get an elite one right away. And they'll usually double up on the position before the top, 12 or 13 are off the board. Not true of every draft. Again, it's a nuanced thing. You got to get a feel for it. But That's typically how I like to handle tight ends.
Yeah, I mean, you and I handled it the exact same way. We were right next to each other, and you took Kelsey and I took Andrews, and then we left it alone completely. I went, I dipped in a little earlier and grabbed like Conklin and Juwan Johnson, just because I wasn't like a big fan of everything else that was sitting on the board at that point. But yeah, I mean, I don't overrate it. However, I did do, if you look over here, Gator J in the third, Kyle Pitts, Evan Engram. I actually did that in a draft, tight end premium draft. That's going on right now. It's a slow draft for Sirius XM. And I did that exact same thing because I get to start two flexes where, I had two flexes in that. And so, I've got Kyle Pitts and Evan Engram, who both of them I know are going to be target monsters. Like that's when it kind of makes sense if you want to do that. A lot really does depend on where you are drafting in a format like this, because like we saw Laporta go early here, but like you started the whole thing when you took Kelsey, right?
I think the other thing that I'll say too, I have seen people start off tight end, which you really wouldn't do outside of a tight end premium league. You wouldn't start that way. And I've seen not a lot of success, but I've seen people succeed with that start. What I have not seen is the people who go tight end in the FFPC, which is fun to draft. It's fun to do that. Haven't really seen it pay off for anybody as far as like a main event or Fantasy Pros, $1 million championship or anything like that. But it is fun to do. I will give you that. It is fun to start off with 3 straight tight ends.
Why wouldn't it be? Why wouldn't it be, man? We love our tight ends. We do indeed. All right. Again, that draft board was from the Fantasy Alarm Draft Guide Tight End Premium Mock. I'm in the same realm as you. I don't need to overrate it, too heavily, because once you start getting down to like your Dallas Goederts and your Dalton Schultzes and your Pat Fryermuths, like you're not seeing a massive difference in statistics, right? You're not seeing any of them, with like a ridiculous number of targets. So like that mediocre, the mid-level guys there, you're not really by loading up on those guys, you're not really giving yourself any kind of like an advantage, so to speak, when you could end up drafting, a guy with, upside like a Xavier Worthy or even like a Jameson Williams type player, instead of grabbing a Goddard or a Schultz or a Fryermuth, kind of a way.
The guy I kind of like in that range, and I know I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth, but if I have an elite tight end early, if I could get a guy like TJ Hawkinson there in the 10th round, a guy who may not start the season off, healthy, but man, in those money weeks, I mean, if he's catching 7-8 balls a week from, Darnold or McCarthy, and again, we don't know. I mean, it's a nebulous situation, right? We don't exactly know what's going to go on there, but man, Hawkinson in a perfect world would be awesome to get in the 10th round and then deploy him out weeks 15, 16, and 17. That'd be a lot of fun. I don't think I can do it this year because he would need to be going lower than he is. But it's something to think about when you're trying to build those $1 million winning teams.
$1 million winning teams. That is always the exciting part, to sit there and build one like that, which is another thing I wanted to actually talk to you about. So phenomenal segue, Balky. It's like you're a seasoned pro at this whole podcast and live stream and sort of a thing. But I want to talk about like big tournament drafting versus contained drafting. It's something that Coop and I have talked about a bunch when we've done Alarm Fantasy Football together. When we were doing some like drafts on a Wednesday. Drafts on a Wednesday with Howard Bender and Andrew Cooper. Check that out. But obviously your strategy for a big tournament draft is significantly different than, hey, I just need to beat these other 11 fools that are sitting in my league. What are some of the key differences for you that you've either seen around the FFPC or just something that you personally like to employ?
I think the biggest thing for me, I think the obvious thing that a lot of people will say is, well, you need to take bigger swings second half of your draft. You need to try to differentiate yourself by being, increase the variance of your roster, which I think that's fine. And that kind of goes without saying, but I'm kind of doing that in my closed 12 team league as well. Right. I'm still taking those big swings in the second half of my draft, because I know if I miss on them, I'm going to be able to go to the waiver wire and pick up somebody who could be a home run for me later on. So I think you got to do that in both formats. I think the biggest difference for me is stacking, whether it's best ball, whether it's managed. I'm definitely more of a fan where I don't want to say I'll go out of my way to do it, but I definitely will look at receivers and quarterbacks later where that I can build stacks, right? Because that can pay off big when you're trying to move up 100 places or 150 places in week 17 to try to get paid for a 6 or 7 figure grand prize. I think that's more important there. Stacking in a closed 12 team league, I mean, I'm sure it makes a difference. I just haven't, it's so negligible, right? It just doesn't make any sense to go out of your way to do it. Now, the other thing too, in regards to stacking, and I talked about this earlier, you have to understand when you overdraft a quarterback or when you overdraft a receiver or a tight end just to make a stack, bear in mind that the reason you're overdrafting them is because somebody already got a deal on them, or somebody already drafted them at their sticker price on ADP.
Right.
And so now all of a sudden you're kind of setting yourself up for a disaster. You're trying to thread the needle by getting the perfect stack, even though you're overpaying for it. And that's something you don't want to do. So in a situation like that, if it happens, great. Hey, take advantage of that opportunity. Maybe it'll be the difference in you getting paid in the final week and not getting paid. But I definitely don't go out of your way, especially to an egregious level, to formulate a stack. And there's different ways to do it later on too. I mean, we talked about the Seattle offense.
Oh, I was just gonna go there.
Yeah.
Yes, stack that up, baby. Go ahead.
You get Lockett, you get Metcalf, you get Smith and Jigba. Well, get Geno Smith later. Tennessee, another one of your favorites. You get Hopkins, you get Ridley, you get Chigokonkwo. Why not take Will Levis late to see what happens? You don't necessarily Dolphins is another one too. Hill or Waddle early, you can get Tunga Vailoa. You don't have to overdraft these guys, and you get nice stacks on your team. Burrow in Cincinnati is another one. And then I think the other way could be true in Green Bay, where you draft Love first, and then you kind of see what you want to do with Wicks or Musgrave or something like that. So it can work both ways. So stacking, I think, is the biggest difference. And just bigger swings in general. I mean, I think that's what you need to be doing. You want to increase the variance. You want to make your team unique, especially in a best ball format where you can't change your roster as the season goes on. How do I make myself unique? How do I maximize my potential? And I think those are the questions that you have to be asking yourself, not necessarily in the first 8 or 9 rounds. I don't think you want to do it there. I think you want to do it later on, unless you have a special opportunity to do, like something crazy where, oh my God, we had Christian McCaffrey go at the 107 of one of our Fantasy Pros drafts last night. Okay, now you have the opportunity to do something pretty cool with when you get McCaffrey at 7. But that doesn't always come along all that often. So you won't always be able to take advantage of something like that. Let the draft come to you, look at what's being presented to you, and that's how you build your winners.
So what about when you're doing something like, you're participating in the main event, but you have to beat the contained draft that you're in, like to qualify for, it's either, yes, top points. So I guess swinging for the fences in that realm. But, if you beat everybody, you win your little 12 team league to go into that main event. So, how do you differentiate between, well, yeah, you have to say to yourself, well, I want to just win this and I'll get my money back and then we'll see what happens with, the overall? Or are you starting off in the main event being like, I've got to think about the overall first and foremost. If I don't win, with this plan, if I don't win this 12 team league, well, then the plan's a bust anyway.
Right. And I think that's how you have to look at it, right? You can't be super crazy with the approach you take to your teams. Now, there will be players that are volume players that you'll be going up against, and they don't care. They'll do all these crazy, like you think about, we open main event drafts in July. Some of these guys have been drafting, main event teams where they start to look pretty similar after a while. So they want to do some different things. They want to, take some crazy chances. You don't necessarily have to do that. I always say, regardless of the league I'm in, whether it's a closed, contained 12 team league or a national tournament, those first 8 or 9 picks, I'm swinging for doubles, right? And maybe singles in certain opportunities. I'm not necessarily taking these home run swings until I have my core on my team. I think you can win your 12-team league still by taking chances. You just can't get crazy with it, like taking 3 tight ends in a row to start off your draft. That's a little crazy. But you're right. I mean, it goes back to, yeah, you're trying to beat out thousands of teams at the end, but you still got to beat those 11 teams. Either winning, getting a 1 seed, or winning your league in the league playoffs. That'll get you to the championship round. I think it's just as, you want to get to the championship round, because otherwise it's all null and void, but you do want to have some firepower there. I think you assemble your firepower and take your shots later on. I don't think you need to be taking crazy home run hacks in round 3 and round 4.
All right. I got you. Listen, I love it, man. I mean, I soak this up, like just listening to you talk about strategies that I know that I'm going to be employing in my FFPC teams. The main event, I'm in the Fantasy Pros one as well. So I'm super psyched about that. I mean, I could literally talk here for hours with you. I know that we both have crazy busy schedules. So, before we get on out of here, want to talk about again everything that we've got going on over at the FFPC. Guys, this QR code right up here, zap that QR code, because that'll take you right over there. Again, when you sign up at the FFPC, use that promo code ALARM, and they'll take care of you. I'm going to give you that, but also I want you to keep in the back of your mind, Balky, what we're going to do is we're going to end this show with Balky's biggest breakout and Balky's biggest fade.
Okay. We'll do breakout first. So this guy, you could make the case that he's already broken out. And it's tough to find a breakout, Howard, for a non-rookie. But I think like any rookie, it's such a lazy, Neighbors, Harrison, obviously
You're going to be great.
Bowers. Yeah. The big breakout season. So I'm going to go with a guy who has put together parts of seasons before, but I'm starting to be a believer that he's going to do it all season. And that's Christian Watson. You can still get him. I don't want to say cheap, but you can get him right now. And I don't think his ADP is going to change too much. Wide receiver 39, end of the 7th round. Wide receiver 39 for a guy who, when he's been healthy, has been a slam dunk top 10 guy. What he's been able to do with Jordan Love and even with the presence of Musgrave and Dobbs and Reed, he's been the guy that has made all the big plays. Again, when he's been healthy. He went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison this past offseason, along with his teammate Eric Stokes, to get their hamstrings looked at to find out why they're dealing with all these soft tissue issues. They found out that Watson had 20% more strength in one hamstring than the other, which was causing a lot of problems. Problems not only for his other hamstring, but for the rest of his body. He says he feels great now since he's been on this plan that the doctors there have prescribed to him. He's been healthy. He hasn't missed any time. He's making plays. He looked great against Jair Alexander in practice more than a couple of times already this year. And it's just a matter for me of him staying on the field. And I was skeptical at first, but I'm starting to believe he is going to stay on the field. He is a guy that has top 10 upside, and you can get him in the late 7th round. That's fantastic. I know he's dealing with Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs and Musgrave and all these other guys. He is the alpha. He is the guy. He represents the highest ceiling player, pass catcher on that team. He's my breakout.
I love that call so much, Balky. I'm going to invite you to play bass in my new band, Asymmetrical Hamstrings.
That's a great. Is that a craft beer or is that an indie band? I don't know.
It's going to be an indie band, dude. Can you play bass?
Yeah, no, I can't play. I can't slap the bass. I cannot slap it. I'm like everybody in my family is really musically inclined or talented. I am not. I'm the only one who's not.
All right. You could be the tambourine girl then.
Tambourine I could do. And girl I can do. Just whatever. You need me to dance. I'll put on the pigtail wig. I can do some dancing for you too.
Nice.
Fade is a guy I think I've talked with you about. I'm still nervous about is Kyron Williams. It just the price is not matching up with what I want to see this year for value for him. Kyron Williams is still going in the 2nd round. I know that the Rams want to utilize him like they did last year but we're still talking about a non-pedigreed guy who dealt with some injuries, and the Rams went ahead and used a premium pick on Blake Corum this year. All those things lead me to believe that I'm going to find a better way to spend a second-round pick than I would if I was utilizing it on Kyren Williams. I'll probably have him in a couple of leagues, but man, it's going to be one of those things where I'm nervous about it. You know, doing that click on Kyren Williams this year, man. I could be wrong, and he could be great, and that Rams offense could be great. I do like the Rams offense this year, but I'm much more team Corum at his price than I am team Williams at his price.
I just handcuffed the two of them. Like, I just took Kyren Williams for the first time in a draft, just because the way that everything was just kind of laid out for the draft. It's a super flex league, and I ended up taking Kyren Williams and immediately moved Blake Corum into my queue. I was like, just got to make sure that I don't forget that and take care of it. Well, Eric, an absolute pleasure getting to sit down and chat with you about all of this. Give everybody the rundown here on why they need to be at myffpc.com right now, or again, zap this QR code right here. But tell them what they got to do, Balky.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, either hit the QR code or go to myffpc.com. You're not waiting around long for these drafts to fill. That's one of the things we're most proud of. Once they get down to 5 or 6 spots left, they get gobbled up. So you won't be waiting long. These are fast filling drafts. You can take advantage of trying to win $1 million grand prize in our Fantasy Pro Championship. We'll give you $50 off each, every third team that you get in that competition. The FFPC main event giving away $1 million grand prize as well. So 2 separate $1 million grand prizes. Our Superflex Best Ball Tournament. We doubled the grand prize this year from $35,000 up to $100,000. And of course, the Empire Leagues and Dynasty Leagues. That's the other thing. I've never seen this much support in our Dynasty space as I have right now. I mean, people are still Dynasty hungry here in August. So if you want to play Dynasty too, jump in a league. They're going to fill fast. All our leagues are filling fast right now. And that's, I think, the best part about this year at the FFPC. Nobody's waiting to draft. Everybody's just drafting.
And there's no reason to wait when it's all right here in front of you. But that's going to do it here for Alarm Fantasy Football. Huge thank you to Eric Balkman from the FFPC to join us. Again, follow him all over his social medias there. That's his Twitter handle there, at Eric Balkman. I'm at RotoBuzzGuy. We appreciate you guys all tuning in. Do me a favor, hit that like button, click that subscribe button. It's a nice free way to just say that you appreciate the content that we're all providing for you over here. But that's going to do it for us here on Alarm Fantasy Football. I'm Howard Bender. For Eric Balkman, we'll catch you next time.